There were 5 of them when the experiment started, each shoved violently by the guards into the specially designed isolation cell.
Залезай!
Нет!
Загнись! Загнись!
Хорошо, хорошо, хорошо!
The guards slammed the door closed behind them. The men pounded on the door and screamed to be set free. But these political prisoners of Mother Russia would be participants in this experiment, willing or otherwise. It was the late 1940s, and the Russians were studying the effects of sleep deprivation. In this cell, equipped with everything the men would need, food, facilities, beds, even books and journals, the men would be constantly exposed to a stimulant gas designed to ward off the human body's need for sleep. The gas flowed into the sealed chamber while microphones recorded the subjects, and scientists watched from behind a 2-way mirror. The men quickly adjusted to the gas and settled in for their long captivity. For 5 straight days, everything was normal. The 5 subjects functioned as any normal human would, except they never slept. They didn't even try. The gas negated the need for sleep.
Таким образом, я дякую ему, но тепер моя сестра, вот моя Женя!
5 days they talked, got to know one another, shared their stories, their hopes with one another. They talked about the experiment and wondered what would become of them. They professed to one another often that they felt fine.
Есть терму.
Достоверно.
Да!
But on the 6th day, a change slowly crept in and took a hold of the 5 men.
Пошанови, не гипотетизианец.
Тик, тик, тик.
A mental and physical paranoia spread throughout the subjects. Their good humor and shared camaraderie was replaced by incoherent whispers to themselves, and no one in particular. Their eyes darted everywhere as if tracking flies or giant bats, and they twitched. Their hands, their faces, the corners of their mouths never seemed to stop jerking and jumping. It was as if each man was being electrocuted by an invisible executioner. And at night, even though there were no windows or timepieces to indicate the hours of darkness, the men stared into the lights of the ceiling, eyes unblinking, bodies still as stone. Then on the 8th day, the paranoia and bodily twitching stopped as suddenly as it had started. The men fell into their sleep trance round the clock. They rarely blinked and hardly moved from where they each sat on their bunks. The scientists wanted to end the experiment, sure that the men had suffered mental breaks. The Russian military overseers commanded that the experiment go on. For 2 days, the men remained in their silent trance. They didn't eat or relieve themselves. The microphone only recorded the quiet hiss of the stimulant gas being forced into the room. On the 13th day, one of the 5 men stood up slowly and silently. The eyes of the 4 other men turned toward him as he stared through the glass of the one-way mirror at the scientists beyond. Can he see us? They worried aloud. But the man suddenly screamed. The scream must have come from the man's very soul, for it pierced the glass itself and rattled the brains of the scientists. Make him stop, they cried. Their skin crawled, and they covered their ears, but the scream seemed to pass through them. And then, still screaming, the man sprinted across the test chamber and flung himself head first against the 3 inches of protected one-way mirrored glass. The impact split the man's skull open like a ripe piece of fruit, and he collapsed to the floor, dead.
Oh, bullshit!
The other test subjects were on their dead cellmate in a matter of seconds, tearing the body to shreds. the gore of their dead cellmate, they energetically spread across the glass.
Bullshit вообще!
The horrified scientists summoned their military overseers and pleaded with them to end the experiment. The military officers watched calmly as the test subjects completely blocked the one-way mirror by tearing up their books and journals and sticking it to the already drying blood and gore.
Experimenta будет продолжаться.
The experiment will continue. The general, unfazed by the horrors of the chamber, calmly informed the scientists. And it did go on, though without one of its top scientists. That night, the number 2 man on the project went home and put a gun in his mouth. The goal was to go an entire 30 days, but after 4 days of no identifiable sound from the men in the chamber, and with the window completely blocked, the general finally yielded to having the chamber opened. The scientists activated the chamber's intercom system. Are going to be freed, the scientists told them, hoping they still lived, but expecting the worst.
We больше не хотим быть освобождены. Мы больше не хотим быть освобождены. Мы больше не хотим быть освобождены.
The raspy voice boomed through the control room, as if the subject had yelled it directly into the chamber's hidden microphones. We no longer wish to be freed. We no longer wish to be freed. We no longer wish to be freed.
We больше не хотим быть освобождены.
The general yelled over the intercom to stand back and lay down or be shot. The other subjects joined in.
Мы больше не хотим быть освобождены.
The gas was turned off and the door was unlocked and opened. Soldiers rushed in. A few of them screamed at what they saw. The 4 remaining subjects were each alive. They continued chanting and looked through the soldiers as if they weren't even there. One then all began to beg for the gas as the soldiers gathered into the room. One soldier had the mind to tear away at the pages caked over with blood and gore on the mirror so the scientists and the general could see what the soldiers could. The medical team was quickly summoned. Every subject had ghastly wounds. Every scratch, every missing chunk of flesh, every bit of exposed bone was clearly self-inflicted. One man had disemboweled himself and taken to ripping and consuming the flesh off his own arm. One man had picked away at his thigh like he was dissecting a frog. The muscle of his thigh had been pulled up and out, exposing his femur. When the medical team lifted this man towards a gurney, he reached into his wound and tore out his own femoral artery. The medical team lost their grip as blood spilled everywhere. The man died within seconds, a smile and a slight laugh on his lips. The medical team did what they could for the remaining 3, but the subjects cried out and thrashed against the restraints with inhuman force. They screamed for the gas and cried at the thought of falling asleep.
Дайте мне газ! Я не пейте спать!
When this subject snapped through an arm restraint and appended an equipment tray, 3 soldiers piled onto him while the doctors sedated him. Seconds after the man had succumbed to the sedation, he let out his last breath and died. Of the remaining subjects, 1 could not be sedated even after taking 4 times the normal dose. Fearing that more doses would kill him, they operated anyway, the subject thrashing and crying. Soldiers had to chain him down. The last remaining subject demanded no sedation and cooperated as the doctors worked to save his life. They had to take one of his arms, but the subject never made a sound. When the medical teams had done all they could, the subjects continued to demand to return to the chamber and to be put back on the gas.
Вы не должны спать. Нам нужен газ.
Да, эксперимент будет продолжаться.
The general wanted the experiment to continue. The two subjects were brought back to the chamber.
Мы должны остановить это безумие. Мы должны убить их.
The scientists begged to have the last two subjects killed to end the experiment, but the general had other ideas.
Вы также будет частью эксперимента.
Нет.
Нет!
The scientists would not be part of the experiment and jumped on the general in a fit of rage. The scientist, driven by fear, pulled the general's sidearm and shot him in the head. Without hesitation, he turned and shot one of the test subjects twice in the head. The subject's body, though dead, slumped back and thrashed about violently. Bones snapped, and the man's wounds reopened, but did not bleed. The last subject began to laugh.
Что ты такой?
What are you? The scientist asked, finally turning the gun on the last subject.
Забыл.
Have you forgotten? The man growled. We are you. What you once were. We are the darkness you see at night. When you close your eyes, you will soon join us. You have seen us, and we will find you. This is what you are. Find us. We will show you.
Ти
Almost
бесплатно.
free.
Почти бесплатно.
Almost free.
Почти бесплатно.
Almost free.
Почти бесплатно.
Almost